You're in Nashville?
I am. I am.
Excellent. How long have you been in Nashville now?
Well, you mean during this during the COVID
Yeah,
era?
has it just been pandemic?
Yeah, yeah. I've been here the whole time. My last gigs were at the end of February, and I've been here ever since. I did go out to California to see my kids for a week in August, and it's a bit scary to travel, and then it turned out to be it felt safe. So next week I'm gonna take a risk and go down to Mexico,
Ooh.
which I've heard is actually they're doing a pretty good job with masks and so forth. So really, I just want to sit on the beach alone.
Oh, don't we all? Don't we all? This has just been so stressful, and I've been doing majority of work from home, and just to get all the pieces parts to work, and you don't have people in
Hmm.
place with you. It's just so stressful.
I know. I know.
I
Yeah.
I did travel. I went to Boston last month and
Yeah.
felt pretty good on the plane. Keeping the middle seat open
Makes
is
a big, yeah. Yeah.
big time.
I know. I know. It made a big difference for me. Um, but I did a concert a couple weeks ago in a studio. It was a remote concert. It was for Nova Scotia. I did it here in Nashville. My bass player had driven up from New Orleans, and it was the first time we played since the end of February. So it was just really nice. And but there's been so little, collaboration. That's the thing I think I miss the most. But I've been so busy doing other things and writing and learning and reading and doing things. Never had this much time off. I mean, if you can call it off, it's knock on wood, all of the gigs have just been rebooked for 21 and 22, so I haven't lost any yet, which is phenomenal. And there's a new record coming out, which comes out in February. Got it right here. It's the
Yes, your
first time.
latest by request.
Yeah.
So that's the big news. This is really what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
All it's 12 tracks on here.
Yeah.
12
12,
they're
12
cover
tracks.
tunes that from folks that have inspired you for ages.
Sure. I mean, and what's interesting is I didn't necessarily pick my favorite songs of these particular artists. In some cases I did, but for the most part, it was about what friends had requested over the years. So it's like inviting the audience at large to come into my house and come to a late night party, and listen to music and play along, sing along, have drinks, um, and while I recorded it last December, it just wasn't realistic to put it out in the spring when it was supposed to come out and not be able to tour. So fingers crossed, things are a little bit better next year and we can tour again.
Yeah, and it must have been now putting this album together. What was that experience like? You got some major talent backing you up on this.
Yeah, it was so much fun to play with my touring band. We'd been touring all year. Gary Malaber on drums, David Berard on bass, and Garrett Stoner on guitar. So we felt really good. We felt sharp. Some of these songs were new to them, but that being said, we had performed all of them at some point last year in preparation for this.
And Sam Cooke is one of the tracks. This is amazing. I just gave this a listen, and I was like, "This to me is like the huge standout." What was the motivation behind that covering that track?
Um, it just became a request, and it was the Harlem Square live Harlem Square concert of Sam Cooke's. It's so amazing. It's my favorite Sam Cooke. It's, him really cutting loose, and, he's always so smooth, and it's always so controlled on the records, and it's beautiful. I love it. I love it. But hearing him perform live, you just get a sense of his life and how soulful he was and easygoing, and just, I loved it. The next single is Billy Preston's "Nothing from Nothing," which I'd played on and off. Again, it was a request. Someone requested a Billy Preston, and I knew a few Billy Preston songs, and played that, and "Will It Go Round in Circles," and and it jumped into the show. Some of these have been part of the live concert, over the years, or at one time. Some of them date back to, being a teenager. Some of them, from my 20s or 30s, or probably the most recent ones in the list are the Sam Cooke, which is, I've been probably playing on and off for, 5 or 10 years. And the Five Stair Steps, Zoo Child, which was a request from my bass player. So it was really fun to just dive in and do this.
Oh, we so need Ooh Child now more than ever. There's just this aura about that track that is so needed when things are so uncertain. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's such a nice, calming lullaby kind of track.
Yeah, it's such a positive track,
It's just so needed in this day and age. And I'm sure that went over well all the years you were doing this live. And
yeah, I mean, and the one that's kind of there's a bunch of stuff that's a little different on here, the Beach Boys track, the Neil Young track, Tom Waits, I arranged them. Some of them I arranged to be like I played them, at home. So some of them were just like the original, so people knew what song it was. In other cases, like, I just wanted to have fun with the arrangement. With the horns on Nothing from Nothing, instead of doing that sort of circus thing that he did, I wanted to treat it a little more in the realm of like Stevie Wonder, the way that the horns were arranged on that stuff. And so it was fun to be able to do it. And, this stuff was recorded live. What you're hearing, I'm singing live, I'm playing live, the band's live. We fit as many people as we could in the studio. And some things had to be overdubbed, some horns, some vocals, background vocals. But for the most part, what you're hearing is what was actually happening at the studio.
yeah, it really works in that sense too. And sometimes it's just better to be more spontaneous. You have that more organic feel throughout the entire record. It's just woven so beautifully that way.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, that was like
I didn't know if it would all fit together. I kind of obviously tried it out. Pre-production is really critical when when you're recording an indie album. The budget just doesn't allow a lot of in-studio experimentation. Nevertheless, I've been working that way for so long that producing an album like this just became, a matter of doing my homework, making sure that that all the pre-production was really clear, the arrangements and the parts, and then give enough freedom for spontaneity so that when that magic thing happens while we're actually playing it, that it's great and we're happy for it. And nothing is particularly stringent in the case of how music is. It should be free and fun, and everyone should be having fun.
It really does translate that. How do you come up with the order of the songs when you're mastering an album? I mean, is it you and the producer? How do you?
I was, as the producer, I had two or three different kind of set lists for it, and the label had a couple different lists for it, running orders, and we just kind of sort of figured out what worked. I think, because I recorded this with vinyl in mind, and it was done analog, as I've done pretty much all my records, before it went to digital to mix, and then back to analog again to tape. It was just it was a matter of just trial and error, seeing what went. What works for an LP is a little different than what works for a CD, because the level at the beginning of a track, and it doesn't matter which album you listen to, whether it's a old rock and roll album or a jazz album or whatever it is, doesn't matter, a funk album, you need to have a certain level, or else that the needle tends to skip on the first song. And so that was a consideration, little things like that you don't think about until you're actually manufacturing it. And I went to a mastering engineer that's really familiar with analog and has done it for their whole life.
So you really, as an artist, and you're also a producer, so you got that technical mind as well. So you hear the differences. How is it different between analog and digital to the lay person out here?
It's actually a pretty simple thing to explain. With analog gear, in general, you have a bit more compression, which means that you hear a bit more of the air around things. So, and you can, once you've recorded to the tape, once you've gone through that mic and the mic pre's and all of the different equipment that you have, it can go to digital, and you can't tell the difference. The difference when you go directly to digital is that you need to create that thing that's a natural compression, because digital is so clean, which is great. I don't have an issue with it. Just that my sensibilities are more analog based. It's what I grew up with. It's what I listen to, and even new music that I dig has been recorded or at least treated in that way.
What microphones are you choosing to work with these? Is it different with every project you have?
It's different. It's also different with every room, and it's different with what the studio has. Most of the studios I've worked at have had a pretty good selection of mics, but that makes a difference. What mic pre's do they have? All the equipment that they have sort of decides that. The last album I did with Dan Penn producing, we switched microphones, vocal mics a lot, because he wanted to get different things out of my vocals, and so to some degree that was really effective. There were certain songs I had to shout louder because the mic just didn't engage the same way, create that compression. And then other things I could sing very softly. So with this, I used a Neumann U87, and then sometimes I just use the 87 Shure, SM87 Shure mic that you've seen me perform with. Because you just get a little bit more of a raw energy from it.
Yeah, that really does help in the rooms that you play. Like when you come here to the Atlanta area, you played Eddie's Attic. Just what a beautiful room that is. And it just works with the shore. It's just like, it's magnificent. How has this project differed from your previous, Just Like Medicine, in terms
Oh man, I think being the producer on this, and I think this is the 4th album of mine that I've produced out of the 10. This is much different in the sense that because the songs weren't mine, I didn't have the same personal connection to the lyrics, to the way that I would, if I wrote a song, I would feel about it. Each song that you write, you have a certain experience or experiences that sort of inform what that song is about, and you have attachment to those things, to those experiences, life experiences. And so with this, that connection really came from this sort of fun environment of being around friends, and just really having a good time with people I care about. So it was a bit easier in that regard. It didn't feel like anything had to be precious. I felt like it just needed to have the energy and feel good and be fun. And if we stopped having fun in the studio and got too serious, I'd say, let's take a break. We'll come back to it. If that's not right, we'll do it tomorrow. But we recorded fast. We recorded this in a little bit less than a week.
Yeah, that had to feel way different. Plus the pressure of not having to write a whole bunch of originals and dealing with lyrics in the studio. It's like those blueprints are done
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, no, and I love it, and I've always done it. So this is the first time I've done an album of covers. I've done a cover here and there on many albums, sometimes one or two, um, but usually it's all original. And all of that has a much different. It has just a different weight, as the person singing it, who wrote it, who wrote the music for it. It just makes a difference.
I like where you've gotten as far as getting more organic on that song "Better Day." That's
Mm.
really, to me, one of your more stripped down ones. That's just gorgeous. How it's just the simplicity of that.
Oh yeah, it's that's, I think, one of the very first songs I learned on guitar. I picked up guitar late, and I was in my 30s when I picked it up, and and you know and I had this old guitar of my dad's, which my mother gave me as a gift, and I learned. And it's an old 30s guitar, so that kind of finger style playing, even though that song hadn't been written in the 30s, it still had that feel to it, that sound. And I just, it just felt good, playing this old guitar on it. And then also, Robin Ford, who I worked with on my first album and a couple things on my second, he lived across the street from me. Now he lives a few blocks away. And so it was great to be able to call an old friend who's just a phenomenal guitar player and say, hey man, can you drop in and just like play a solo on this? And he was like, absolutely. He came over and we just had fun with it.
Oh, how great to have somebody that close.
Yeah, yeah. And there's so many great players in my neighborhood, but um, I because I was working mostly with my core touring group. Only one of them is from here in Nashville. It was kind of fun to bring some of those people in. Of course, the singers are from here, the background singers, the settles, and the horn players who are just phenomenal. Jim Hoke did a bunch of the arrangements. He's just an absolutely brilliant musician, plays everything. He's one of those guys that can, he'll pick up a saxophone and then he goes over and plays organ or vibes or pedal steel. I mean, he's just a real virtuoso.
That's amazing. How does somebody become such a multi-instrumental, like you're obviously you were on piano and you mastered that. How do you
Yeah.
convert yourself to picking up a guitar? What do you listen for?
Well, so if I had done it the way that you're actually taught to do it, is actually to start on piano to get a good understanding, a visual, at least a mental picture of how the keys are laid out, how the chords are laid out, and then you simply apply that theory to every instrument, and but for me, it took me a few years before I even wanted to learn more than 4 or 5 chords, because what I loved about guitar was that it was completely different than piano for me. And I could see every option on the piano, whereas on the guitar, I had so few, it forced me to write in a different way and to focus on different aspects of songwriting. So it was a learning process. And then I got to a place where I'm like, oh, I want to learn how to play this Les Paul thing. I want to learn how to play this, what are those Django scales? And what is this, how do I play this Steve Cropper riff? And how, all of those kind of things sort of came later for me. It's just kind of part of life. And then by the circumstance for me, I learned, I can't speak for Jim Hoke and how he did it, but, I started recording at home. So I just started playing bass, and then I needed percussion. I started playing percussion. And percussion and piano is very similar. Steel guitar and piano have a lot of similarities just because they're laid out, in a horizontal fashion. It's open, as I imagine the piano is very open. So some of it is just theory, and some of it is just the way that we interpret the world,
Really amazing. I like how, speaking of interpretation, the Beach Boys tune that you cover, "Sail on Sailor," it's just,
Oh,
I wouldn't know it was even Beach Boys. It's just you're honoring them, but you're putting your stamp on that. How did that come
it's
about? Yeah.
yeah. My friend Henry Gross, was a popular singer songwriter
Oh yeah.
in the 70s, and he came over one day and was like, "Hey, do you know Sail on Sailor?" And that was how that happened. And I just, when I was working it out with the band, and especially with David Berard on bass, I said, let's treat this a little bit like it's a chess style recording. And then we're going to go to another place, sort of like we're going to treat this almost like a psychedelic chess recording, and Malabar, Gary, who plays drums with me, had played with the Beach Boys at one time, as did Henry, and in the 70s, both of them, in different places. And so they were familiar with the material, and I just, and so once we had the sort of basics of it and all of that, I just wanted to add something unique. So I put a harmonium on, which is, one of those Indian keyboard instruments,
Oh,
very
geez.
similar,
Yeah.
very similar to an accordion in a way. And so I brought that into the studio and did that. And then in parallel to that, asked Jim Hoke to play a bass harmonica, which is a huge instrument. And just has this great low tone, very reedy, And so the combination of those two kind of bizarre instruments in the choruses, I just thought was fun, and it added a real sort of psychedelic thing to it because they're so unique sounding,
So a little bit of inspiration from Henry Gross, who had a huge hit in the mid 70s. The
Right.
song called Shannon,
Shannon, yeah.
about a dog that one of the Beach Boys owned that was
Gave
lost.
to him. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just, what a gorgeous song, and probably one of the best falsettos in the history of
And he still has it, he actually called me right before I sat down here. He has a new joke every day, he's like a Borscht Belt comic.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. He started off with Sha Na Na at Woodstock, and the day after that, day after they played at Woodstock, he realized he didn't want to be in that group anymore, and he left. And we ended up meeting in the 80s. On the first time I came to Nashville to do a session with Cowboy Jack Clement, which I've told you about in the past.
Oh yeah.
I visited Henry, and
Yeah.
he had there was this whole crew of East Coast musicians. Him and Gary Talent was part of it. From E Street Band, bass player,
Oh yeah.
and Felix Cavalieri, organ player with the Young Rascals. That whole crew of East Coast, Gene Pastilli at the time, it was all these like East Coasters in Nashville that had been doing rock and roll or singer-songwriter stuff or whatever, And I sort of realized this place was a bit more diverse than it let on.
That just worked out beautifully. And you have the New Orleansy connection here,
Of
Alan
course.
Font.
Yeah.
How did that
Um,
all come about, putting that on by request?
that was a request that Marlowe used to make, because if you listen to the lyrics of it, it's about this woman, who's partner is playing music, and she's tired of going to the show. She like likes what he does. She's not saying he's not good at what he does. She's just tired of it. And she's saying, go do your thing, I'm gonna stay here. And so I love that song. um, um, Frankie Miller did probably the most amazing version of that song. I've played it. I played it a bit here and there, and of course, Toussaint was a big influence and a friend and a producer of mine, and we had played together many times. Four-handed piano at the end of shows and stuff. When I was in New Orleans the last few times, he would come out, and sit in and play with me. It was just really a nice thing. And David Berard, my bass player in my band, he got started with AT. Alan Toussaint was like, brought him in, and at that point, David had played with some of the other sort of legendary New Orleans folks, some gigs with Irma Thomas, some gigs with Lee Dorsey, and Toussaint, of course, had produced both of them, and so David played with him during the trying to think Southern Nights period, that Alan Toussaint's Southern Nights period. And then he introduced him to Dr. John, and he was out on the road with Dr. John for 30 years.
Love
So
that.
we've been together for 4 or 5 years, and that song came up, and he was on the original. I mean, he played it on the original with Alan Toussaint, so he knew it inside and out. And when I would try and switch a little thing, he would go, "No, that's not how it is." I'm like, "I know, it's all right. We can do stuff a little different. We can pay our tribute and still sort of have our way with it." And hopefully, it worked out all right. I think I could have played it better. I think I could have sung it better than I did on the record, honestly. But it just had a feeling in the moment, and I knew that was right at that time. And sometimes you're in the studio and you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to beat yourself up about it. You want to have fun. And if you lose that, then then what's the point?
Yeah, then that's where you can put the pressure on yourself to be so like, I want to just get this right and do the cover exactly
I
the
don't
way
want,
we
yeah,
want. Yeah.
no, I don't want that. I've always sort of learned the right way and then thrown it out. And it's kind of everything in life for me is like that. Learn the fundamentals, so that you understand it, and then you can break the rules. But until you understand the theory or the fundamentals of something, I think just for myself, I want to be able to understand that stuff, and then I can go any direction I want. And that's kind of what we did with a lot of songs on this record.
Yeah, I think you accomplished very well with being your own version of, you're not trying to be Rod Stewart, but Stay With Me, which is just such a rollicking,
Oh
great
yeah.
song. Uh,
Yeah.
you weren't trying to be exactly like it.
Oh,
You
not at
weren't
all.
rearrange it.
No, I mean, I love Rod Stewart. I love his singing. Again, this is not my favorite Rod Stewart song,
Yeah.
but I think of it as the faces, and I always loved Mac, Ian McLagan, the keyboard player for the Small Faces and the Faces, and Bob Dylan, and all kinds of groups over the years, the Stones. He had a way of playing, clearly influenced by American rock and roll, Johnny Johnson, who was with Chuck Berry. You can hear Little Richard's influence on him. You can hear the boogie stuff, from the late 40s, early 50s in his playing. But he has something that is distinctly sort of an English interpretation of it. And it has a loose factor, and I just love it. It has, he played with a lot of soul. And so I was thinking about Ian McLagan in a way, even though I was singing at the same time as I was playing the Wurlitzer, I was thinking about Mac more than I was thinking about Rod Stewart, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah, and then it really shows that way too. I also like that you tackle Three Dog Night, which is like one of
Well,
the.
it's actually a Randy Newman song. Yeah, the Randy Newman song, which is, again, it's not anywhere near the top of my
Yeah.
favorite Randy Newman songs, but it was a request, and it's such a fun song to play. And the way I thought of it was like, there was a band that did a cover of that in the early 70s of that a Randy Newman song called Flamin' Groovies. They did a great version of it, great rock and roll version of it. And I had this imaginary, this moment in my head, sort of a daydream where what if Little Richard sat in with the Flamin' Groovies and brought his horn section with him? What would that sound like? And so that's kind of how I treated it. I simplified the piano. I did record it twice. First time had all of these inversions and different chords, and it was a little heady. If as far, not that you might not have noticed it, but it took the simplicity away. It was more sophisticated, and the engineer shouted in and she said, "Hey, try it again, same energy, but just play like you did when you were 15." And I love that idea. And it was the same thing that I had heard Jim Keltner say to me when we were recording Me in the Bar. He said, "Let's treat this like we're 15 years old, and we're a high school rock and roll band." And I mean, and in that session, it was him and Ry Cooder and just like a ridiculous lineup of musicians, all playing like they were 15, and I always love that. Again, it's a bit like you have the fundamentals and then you throw them out, and so that was fun. Also, I have such a close connection, not to Randy Newman as a person, but to his music. And it was the first show that I went to as an infant was to see Randy Newman and my father play, because they were touring together, and toured for almost a year together. So it was always in my ears. I had heard that, and it was Sail Away was one of the first songs I learned on piano.
Just amazing. Randy Newman, I talk about Americana, one of the greatest American songwriters, and he's so deserved so many accolades. Gosh, the guy's everything for Grammys, Academy Award.
Yeah.
Phenomenal artist.
He is, and his whole family are, he's from a family of absolutely brilliant film composers. His cousin Thomas Newman is a phenomenal film composer, and he does some television as well. I absolutely love his compositions. Really, it's him, but he goes so many different ways. It's Randy Newman because he kind of has this kind of style, and that with Thomas, he's pulling from a lot of other places. Same thing with his uncle Alfred, who composed in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and probably one of the most renowned film composers of all time. Alfred's compositions are just absolutely brilliant. He came a little bit from the Broadway kind of composition, but just so phenomenal. And there was also another uncle, Emil, I think, who was another composer. Just family of really talented people.
Anybody written a book on the Newman family? There's so much material.
Probably.
There's got to be something.
Yeah. but I think my favorite actual album is probably of Randy's is Good Old Boys, just because there's just so many good things, and he just pushes. He's one of the bravest songwriters, one of the bravest performers that most people wouldn't credit the audience for being able to understand that's what he's singing about is not necessarily what he believes. What he's singing about is the character that he's playing. So when
Right.
he's playing rednecks, he's playing this redneck character who is, lives in this particular world, um, but what it says is just, it's like a thesis on American racism, and it's amazing, and it was hard for people to listen to in whenever 72 when it came out, and it's even harder for people to listen to now, I think, because of the divides in this country. So it's really stood up. But besides that, he did this live album right before that, at the bitter end. That's just so good, so
Mhm.
incredibly good. Just solo. If you don't have it, you
Yeah.
should get a copy of it. It's just really simple. Yeah, and it's like Randy Newman live at the bitter end, and he wasn't well known yet. He had some successful songs. He had the Three Dog Night cover. I think Nielsen might have covered and some of his stuff, but it was still early, and it's beautiful.
Yeah, a lot of people didn't understand with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when they honored him. It's like you don't understand. You wouldn't have a lot of other stuff, without a Randy Newman. And then you really, really go back. A lot of stuff that we're all hearing now. It goes back to the blues guys. They just all created it. Mississippi John Hurt,
Yeah,
people like that. It's just we wouldn't have that all today. How has
yeah.
Neil Young inspired you? This is a really really, really
Um,
good song.
I just, a friend of mine asked for it about 5 years ago. And so I threw it into a concert I was playing here. Um, and if I knew that she was going to come to the show, or if she came over, she would request it, And so that was it. It was that simple. And, it's a bit of a lesser known song of his. Um, he's got such an incredible volume of work, but it's not his most famous song. Just happened to be one that I liked, and I was playing it for a friend.
I love when an artist can do that. And I kind of put that in the same league, like when Manfred Mann took Blinded by the Light. And that's
Yeah,
originally a Bruce Springsteen
or
song. Your original really didn't
right,
wow you, but wow.
right, or Moody Blues, doing Bessie Banks, "Go Now."
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And her version is still more powerful to me, um but the fact that they even did it and introduced that song to a new audience the same way that the Stones introduced Time Is on My Side, um and that introduced a lot of people to Irma Thomas, who had done it before them.
Yeah, it gives it a whole new meaning. I love when somebody could rework a song. A lot of times some covers aren't going to work, but when you could rework it and then it becomes this huge hit single, and it
Yeah.
is for all the right reasons. They did a beautiful
Oh
rearrangement.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm always
absolutely.
wowed by that. I like Nothing Compares to You. I mean, a lot of people like Prince's original version, but Sinead O'Connor's version is just that's the one I know. It's like iconic.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course. But the live version of Prince doing it with Rosie Gaines singing it, oh my God,
Yeah,
Rosie Gaines just sings her ass off. She
yeah.
is, what a singer. So it gives me chills thinking about it. But of course, I discovered the song through it being on MTV at the time, because I hadn't heard the live version of Prince doing it. So that happens sometimes.
Yeah, it's like totally striking gold. And Temptations are another huge. I mean, just an incredible influence on so many artists.
Uh huh. And they had so many incarnations too, the David Ruffin period, versus, just the different singers that came in to lead the group.
On Ain't No Justice, the keyboard is what really, it just totally stands out.
I treated it, originally it was played on piano. I wanted it to have this bit of a distorted Wurlitzer sound. And I wanted it to be funky, but it does have there's a lot of jazz notes in there, but it's live, and I invited a bunch of friends into the studio and put a mic in the kitchen of the studio, bought a bunch of drinks, wine and whiskey and just different drinks for people. And they had a huge party. And originally the party was going on through the song. It was just, they started having too much fun, so
you have to.
So we just left the intro of them all shouting. Yeah, that's one of my favorites on the record because it's different from the original. It just has a great feel to it. And there's not very many words in the song except for Ain't No Justice. And yet I think there's something about it in this moment, in time, that a lot of people can relate to that.
Another artist, Solomon Burke.
Oh God, I love him.
What an incredible artist. And just be able to really get the essence of that artist and translate it onto your record. That must have been an incredible process.
I've always loved that song. When I was a teenager, I played it in a band, but we did the Zombies version of it. And
it's got that feel.
And so, but when I recorded it, I played the electric guitar on it a little bit more like the original. And then I immediately, as soon as I sang and played it, went over to the organ, which was like this Booker T style A100 Hammond, same one the MGs worked on, and that and I just did one pass. Just wanted it to have a little bit of that, a little bit of gospel. More gospel-y, a little more soulful than the Zombies version, but still a bit of a tip of the hat to them and Rod Argent's, great playing. So, I'm a huge fan of music, and there was most of these songs, there's other versions that I know of that are great. And it's just, it wasn't about trying to pick obscure stuff or try and pick popular stuff. It was just about the songs that my friends have asked me for over the years. And if it connected with them, then it might be good for all the friends out there that I don't know yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it's all gone down well in concert. You probably can't wait to get back out there. Hopefully.
I know. Yeah. One of the ones that goes over really well again is Ain't No Justice in concert because it's just such a lively song, but we've tried them all, Stay With Me always goes over well. And of course the Sam Cooke song and Solomon, they're all fun. It's all fun to play, and I think it's surprising when people hear the Tom Waits song and not necessarily expecting it, but I like that. Just throw stuff in when someone's not expecting it.
Yeah, and that's when I've seen you in the past. It's like, you don't expect to hear a cover mixed in with all your originals. Mm-hmm. And it's just in the right place in your program, just when you really need it. You bring them up and then you go into your next original.
Yeah.
It always works.
Oh, thank you.
It really does. One I always love that you always covered Sir Elton John's "Take Me to the Pilots."
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you ever put, yeah.
That's never been on anything, but I played it for long enough. I think it might have been on a B-side for something. I'm not I'm not exactly sure, but it's been recorded somewhere. It's been recorded. Same with maybe I'm amazed. I played that for a while. I recorded that, but this is the second song of Solomon Burke's that I've recorded. The first one was on my third album, which was "Cry to Me." And I did it a bit more like a New Orleans thing, not quite like Long Hair, but sort of, again, just to like a tip of the hat to the New Orleans version, a little bit of the Solomon Burke, but I can't sing like Solomon Burke, so
Yeah.
I want it has to be me, I just have to do what feels right, you know, for
And
my
it seemed
style.
like the timing was so right to release by request. Did you feel that the timing was really good, and what inspired it to be out now at this time and juncture?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of perfect. It really is, there's because there's so much that's serious going on in the world, and I think that it's the perfect moment for some music that's just fun. That's just it's like having a party with a bunch of friends. Who doesn't want that right now?
Yeah, that's where it's really much needed, and it's going to be great. And especially now we're getting into the winter time. It's just the perfect season for that too.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Do you plan on, you haven't done too many music videos. A lot of artists are not really too into that. You've done a
I'll
few.
do a couple. Yeah. I mean, I'll do one. I'll probably do, two or three. Um, you know, it's it's kind of interesting. You can't really choose which songs are the ones that are going to connect with people. So I've sort of chosen songs that connected for me to do videos out of, and I think that's most effective. Like song "Hung Up on You," because for a number of reasons has been probably one of the more successful songs that I've had. Um, and it's very sort of pop oriented. I wouldn't have expected that. I thought it was a light-hearted take on a very serious thing. Serious topic, but sort of a light approach lyrically, and I just didn't expect that to be the thing. Same thing. Whereas just like medicine, that made more sense to me, and the fact, and it was a song that was personal to me that I'd written for Marlo, and I just felt like, that's obviously the song I want to make a video out of. And I think that's kind of how I need to do it. If I have an idea, then I will. We'll see. I've had this idea about a song. Sometimes I want to make a video for a song I recorded years ago, and there was one in particular that I had wanted to borrow that last scene from Lady from Shanghai,
Yeah.
with the mirrors and the Orson Welles.
Oh yeah.
And it's like the final and it's really the best scene in the whole movie. That sort of film noir Orson
Yeah.
Welles thing.
Oh, it'd be fun to
And,
replay.
and I just wanted to be able to somehow recreate that. And
Yeah.
if I can find enough mirrors, I will.
Absolutely. One of your concept videos, Coraline, it was one of them.
Yeah, Coraline, I did. Yeah. I don't remember them all. There hasn't been too many. I think there's plenty of live concert stuff, and I mean, it's not like the label's paying for it. It's really just something that I want to do, and I think most artists are like that now. It's something that they like, and so someone in the band or their friends come around, and you kind of do something. And I think there's a very sort of cool egalitarian aspect to the way a lot of people are doing videos. It's not the 80s any longer.
Right.
Where there were these huge productions.
It's a good promotional tool, but you don't have to, because now everybody can get a camera.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be a Duran Duran video or Michael Jackson or Peter Gabriel to like connect with an audience anymore. you know.
Right. I think that's the good thing. I'm glad that it kind of turned that way. That had its time in the 80s. And
I'm glad that people put that much energy into making great videos, because I think it's great. And you know, when you look back at conceptual ideas that bands had in the 50s or 60s or 70s, that before that was a really common thing, it's like I'm so grateful that they took the time to do that with a song, you know.
oh yeah.
So in hindsight, it's great to see an old Stones thing where they took the time to like make a video. They didn't know that was what it was at the time. It was just like, we have this idea, you know, and it was
Right.
an art piece, you know. I
Very
love that.
So during all the lockdowns and everything, where do you find inspiration now that you're doing writing and you're thinking about the next project?
Well, I've been working on a handful of film projects in different capacities. There's a feature that I'm a producer on. That's a new job for me, and that really came about more intensely during the lockdown. And there's 4 documentary projects that I'm working on as well. You know, in different capacities. Some as composers, some as, you know, as just a part of production in some fashion. And and then from a musical perspective, I really wanted to take the time to practice new things. I've played a lot of guitar and trying to become a better player, trying different styles of picking, different styles of playing, different scales with the piano. Really gone into a place of sort of finding ways to do things I've never done before. I started taking a lot of classical pieces, whether, you know, Bartok, Chopin, or, you know, pieces that I love, and sort of deconstructing them, finding the sort of underlying internal melody that works, or Ellington, or, you know, Teddy Wilson. You know, and this Ellington piece that I sort of took apart had been something that had been written by Bach, and then he turned it into E St. Louis Toodaloo, and then whether they knew it or not, the Beatles used the same section, and I'm sure George Martin knew, because he played a little piece in the middle of Girl that was very reminiscent of the Bach version, you know, Bach's version, the original. And and so just taking little pieces of music. Also been playing Brazilian music, been playing tangos, been playing just a lot of Indian raga scales, and incorporating them into music that I'm writing. It's just been a chance to do things I never had time to do. I just didn't have time to play ragas for 2 or 3 hours. It just there was no time to do that. So getting good at them, and playing them on an instrument that's not supposed to be played for them is also another thing, you know. I don't know. I think that it's been I won't regret all of the practice time this year, you know. And I think my music will really benefit from it. May not be next year, may not be the year after that, but this time of being able to practice the way that I have, you know, all that stuff takes years, you know, to become truly, you know, good at. And I think that's fine. It just gets incorporated a little bit at a time, and hopefully my music will grow because of it.
It's fantastic. I see so much self-inspiration. I think that should inspire others, especially during this trying time. You're continually creating,
I
and
try
it's
to,
so
yeah.
inspiring to see somebody from you, or, you know, like Taylor Swift's got a big album coming out. She's totally at home, right? And
Yeah.
Paul McCartney has just now put out his zillionth album. He's
Yeah. Yeah.
he's
Yeah.
I think that's incredible to be able to create the entire thing totally on your
Fiona Apple
own.
did that earlier this year, and that was great too. She did it all at home. Fiona Apple's record.
Oh yeah, that's just it's amazing how artists are able to do that, and you
Yeah, I
become a
love
jack
it.
of all these trades.
I love it. I love it. And that's how you learn I play different instruments.
Yes,
You know,
Absolutely.
lock yourself in the studio and alone, and you learn how to play everything.
How's it been going with these live, like you doing social media concerts? Have you done a few of
You
those?
know, I did. I don't. I'll be honest with you. I don't love it. You
Yeah.
know, it's one thing to be an engineer. It's one thing to be a videographer. It's another thing to be a musician. When I'm playing a concert, I don't want to wear different hats. I just want to be the person that's playing, and to have to worry about all of the technical little glitches that come along with live Facebook shows um, kind of ruins it. The other thing is that there's no audience, so you know you don't play with the same energy because you're not getting anything back. And so I've sort of decided that when I do those, that I'll pre-record them and ideally, play with other musicians in a safe environment, but with other people, because at least we can entertain each other, you know,
Yeah.
and and that's hard to do when you're by yourself on camera. It's fine to do once the camera's off, but um, I mean, you got to be careful these days.
Oh, what's going on these Zoom meetings?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh my Lord.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the whole thing. You want to, I mean, you're an artist. You have to, care about your piano, the instruments and all that. You don't need to be schlepping all the equipment and worrying about all that other stuff. That's got to
Right.
break
It's,
constantly.
I mean, if I just played guitar, it would be, if that was it, if I just played acoustic
Yeah.
guitar, it'd be pretty easy. Because the iPhone and iPad do a great job of recording it. But a piano is so huge and dynamic that in the mid range where your voice fits, it decides, the sort of device decides whether it wants to focus on your voice or on the piano. And so all of a sudden that adds a need for amplification that you didn't have, and mixing, and so it's partially it's because I'm a piano player, and I'd prefer, but the other part is I'm a live performer, and I miss that, you know.
It's going to be tough. Hopefully soon, at least they could bring in like maybe half audiences that are all COVID negative. Let's hope. And that maybe
Right,
place
fingers
like City
crossed. I
Winery.
mean, yeah, City Winery is doing outdoor tents here, and they're being responsible about it. I know they have the inside set up, and I've played there many times, and usually it's a 500 or 600 seat room, and I think they've got 150 seats, so they're really separated, and that's good.
Hmm,
You know,
excellent. Yeah.
but fingers crossed. Hopefully,
Yeah.
I think the vaccine is going to be the only thing that really gets people back to seeing live shows.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think that's a necessity. Whether people choose to get it or not is another thing, but I think just the comfort of knowing that it exists
Cool.
is
I
that'll
know.
be it.
Hopefully it keeps the numbers, it gets the numbers down. It's going to take a while to get the vaccine into the culture, and
Yeah,
hopefully these numbers can come down. This is so depressing, but
I know.
there are always silver linings to these kind of tragedies too.
Yeah, man.
Well, thank you so much for your time. Have a good trip. The new album is By Request. You have to hold up. I don't know if I got to see the artwork on this. Yeah, that's the
So
iconic.
I what I did on I actually stole the idea from um,
Reminds me of something.
I don't know if you have this record. It was a 50s album by why am I drawing a blank? Great old ha cha cha cha. Um, Great old vaudeville entertainer Jimmy Durante.
Oh, Jimmy Durante, yes.
And he did this album cover, and it was the back of him sitting at an upright piano with all these hats on the top of it, and um, and I thought it was great, and I knew no one would. I didn't think anyone would know it, and I thought anyone that did would love it even more because of that.
Sweet. get a copy today. You could download, probably go to your Sam Goodies, right, or wherever, and get a copy
Yeah.
of By Request, the newest, the latest from AJ Croce. Thank you for stopping by the corners this evening.
Oh, thank you so much.